Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'll ask, if you don't mind, if you would use the chat function to share your name and organization so we know who is on the call. I think we've got most everybody, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Dean Hybl. I'm the Executive Director of 10 at the Top, and we are an organization, as most of you know, that encourages a collaboration and partnerships across the 10 counties of the Upstate. And one of the things we have been doing here over the last couple of weeks is we recognized, as the COVID-19 situation and crisis has evolved from the initial responses by our communities to more of a, okay, how do we move forward, that every community is working on things and has some of their own issues and challenges related to that. And what we felt like in our role as a regional convener was we wanted to kind of hear from and understand what is happening in our what we're calling the non-urban communities in the Upstate, all of our communities with the exception of Greenville, Anderson, and Spartanburg first, to hear what your challenges, your opportunities, what you've done well, what you need help with as a community, where things are and where you're going. And then when we're done with those, we intend to kind of take what we've heard, synthesize it together, identify where there are commonalities and perhaps opportunities for us to work collectively across the region in some manner to address some of these issues. This is the 7th of our 7 calls, the 4th one we've had this week, so it's been a fun week. We've done all of them in the last 3 weeks, and it has been very enlightening from across the counties in the Upstate. And our team, I'll introduce in a minute, has been very good in hearing and learning from folks all over the Upstate. And I know it will be the same here in Pickens, because you guys have really been rocking it in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of positive things going on here that I look forward to hearing, but also what your challenges and your concerns are. So before we get started, I do want to introduce my team, because what we're going to do is we have a series of questions we're going to ask to each of you, to you all as a group, and ask you to engage with, and several different folks will be asking the questions. We have Erin Ouzts, who is our director or coordinator of the Upstate entrepreneurial ecosystem. She's going to ask questions around entrepreneurship and economic development and things of that nature. Then we have Michael Hildebrand, who is the coordinator of the Upstate Mobility Alliance. He will be asking some questions around infrastructure and mobility. And then Justine Allen, who is our events and program coordinator. She's going to ask questions around social services, around public health, around education, some of those areas. And then Sharon Purvis, who is our outreach coordinator, will wrap us up and ask some general questions to end things. But before we get started, I want to take a minute and ask you all for your input holistically. We've been trying to gauge kind of what the folks in the room feel their community, how things have gone around different elements of the COVID-19 crisis and the impacts. And so you'll see I've launched a poll. There are 6 questions. They're all generally offshoots of each other. And the first one is, when it comes to social services and healthcare in Pickens County, how do you feel your community's personal well-being needs have been met? And it's 1 not being met at all, up to 10 met at all levels. And then if you scroll down, the second question, similar, within your county, how do you feel the needs of your manufacturers and other large employers have been met? Then the third one is, feel the needs of your restaurants and retail stores have been met. Number 4 is your local non-chain or franchise small businesses and entrepreneurs. Number 5 is your schools, your K-12, your colleges, and your universities. And then number 6 is the local and county governments. And so what we ask you to do is to answer all of those, answer all 6 before you hit submit. You should be able on the far right to scroll down to be able to do that. And we're going to take a minute or 2 here and give you time to answer those questions. So if you would go through and answer the questions, we're starting to get some responses now. I think we should have about probably somewhere between 16 and 18 folks who are on the call here from Pickens. So hopefully we'll get some good responses here. So we'll give you a minute to go ahead and answer those questions. Is anybody having challenges before we, as we go there? If you're having problems answering, please let me know in the chat. And but hopefully folks are going through and answering those questions. Good to see some familiar faces. Roy, good to see you, and Ken, and I saw Ray Farley down there, and Jordan, I think you've been on most of these calls. Rick, good to see you. Cindy, always great to see you. Emily, I'm disappointed you're back at Duke Energy. You're no longer at the beach. All right, we're up to 9. Allison, it's great to see you. It's been quite a while. Hope everything is going well. And I know some other faces here, so please continue to answer the questions. We're kind of stuck at 9. We should have a few more folks responding. Is there anybody having problems answering? All right, we'll give it about 30 more seconds. We're up to 11. I would think we should get a couple more. Art, good to see you as well. All right, I'm going to give it another couple seconds because we have 12, but I think we should probably have a couple more responses. So if you're able to answer and you have not, please let me know. Let's see. Susan, great to have, we have 2 Susans, Susan Cohen and Susan Kastner. Glad you're both here. We seem to be stuck at 12, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. The first question, when it comes to social services and healthcare, and this is probably not a surprise for most of you because I know Pickens is very strong in some of these areas. We're at 7, 8, and 9 and 10, all very strong. So when you average that out, you're probably looking about an 8.5, which I would say is probably as high as we've seen in any of the counties in terms of the social service and healthcare follow-up. So that is great. Manufacturing and large employers also very strong, 7, 8s, and 9s. Again, not necessarily a surprise there, and we'll want to hear Roy and Ray and others from you guys in a few minutes about kind of your experiences there. The needs of your restaurants and retail stores, pretty similar with most everyone. Start having some 4s and 5s. 6 is the number 1 response here with some 7s and 8s. But that's a little bit higher than we've seen in some of the other communities, but that is certainly an area that has had challenges. Then your non-chain small businesses and entrepreneurs, you guys look pretty good, Erin, as you look at these 6s and 7s as the majority of your answers. Then the needs of your schools. I know this has been a strength in Pickens County, and again, it shows mainly 7, 8s, and 9s there. So again, good for the school. I know Danny is not on the call, but I think we have Mr. Byrd representing the school system. Darren, glad to have you as well. And then the last one, city and county government. And just on the basis of Ken's daily videos, I think, you know, y'all deserve high grades there. That's been as entertaining as anything I had seen from anybody. And Ken, thank you for your great work there. But, you know, mainly 8s, 9s, and some 10s. So very positive. Any comments specifically on any of this from any of you? Please either unmute yourself or let me know, and I'll unmute you. Ken, anything from on your end there with the county?
Well, just one thing that I do want to talk about, and I think I'm unmuted. Make sure, give me a thumbs up if you can hear. But one thing is, I've been very proud of our staff as they have kind of developed on the fly a 3-phase reopening plan. As we're looking at the numbers right now, just for our county government, you know, we want to keep a close watch on that, and we're in phase 3. We're at the new normal open. But we've got the capability to roll back to an earlier phase. And that was something that staff developed. Some of the folks on this call helped develop and innovate. So I was been very pleased with that. I guess some of the frustrations that we have is, you know, what you're probably hearing everywhere else. And that is, we've got a lot of small businesses and a lot of small restaurants, non-chain stores, and those sorts of things that I feel like are really suffering. And I wish and I hope that for the next, you know, the next thing, whatever it is, that we've got a knowledge base built where we can be more assistance to them. Personally, I felt like I haven't been able to do things to help them enough. I know our county council is considering some economic stimulus ideas, but I just want us to get better and better at that, because that part of it seems to be something that the unique nature of your community, the unique nature of your neighborhood comes from those individual stores. And I feel like we need to backstop them some way.
Ken, thank you. That's a great point. And Erin will ask some questions about that. And through our entrepreneur ecosystem group, you know, we've had some feedback and some ideas there. So there might be some opportunities to work with, you know, your community and folks, some of whom have already been engaged in that conversation. But that is certainly something that is a challenge across a lot of our communities. I want to move on. And we'll get some feedback from you guys on this. One of the things that that we have heard from communities is or seen is that you know, there have been collaborations that have been created specifically to you know, support your responses to COVID-19. And I think in Pickens, as I recall, you guys were very proactive around that. Can you talk about whether you took some already existing relationships, or if you, you know, what you did to create kind of your coalition of leadership and folks who have been your committees and your task forces around collaboration through COVID-19. Can somebody respond to that? Maybe Ken or Roy? Ken?
I'll let the chairman speak first if he'd like to on that.
The only thing that I would say, and then Ken, you can follow up, absolutely follow up on this. The one thing that we did when we declared a state of emergency was to try to create something that was going to help our at-risk population. That was the reason that we wanted to go into that, not just for the sake of saying, hey, we're in an emergency, but hey, we need to really, what can we do to solve that? And through the help of Mr. Roper and through the whole coalition team that he created with the oh my goodness, the airport guy.
That's right. That's right.
Sorry. But now we're able to actually repurpose some of we had a lot of people with the county that were going, well, I'm willing to work, but there's not anything for me to do. And now we were able to do more with some of the groups like Meals on Wheels or some of the other charitable organizations that actually needed help, because those people still needed to get meals out or be in touch with that at-risk population. So that was one of the first things that we did. And the only other thing I'll mention, and then I'll let Ken speak to it, is it's been interesting to me on whether it's small business that we're trying to work on with taking procurement from 3% to 5% for local. Those things take time because they're ordinances and we got to have 3 readings. So it's not something that local government can just go, well, let's make it happen. we've got 3 different things that are in the pipeline that are hopefully going to help those small businesses. But that's something that, you know, our hands are tied a little bit when trying to accomplish those things. That, and it seems that all of every business, whether it's small or all the way up, they're looking to a local government to say, how do we do this? And we have no idea how to do this. And so everybody's inventing their own or creation of how they come out of the crisis and what does that look like. So to me, it's bizarre that you go into a grocery store and you see, you know, tons of people, and then you go to a jewelry store and they're allowing 2 people in at a time. You know, so it's everybody's creating their own thing. So, but anyway, Ken, would you like to speak some to the at-risk, the whole program that you created really? Basically, we just gave you direction and you did it.
Right. Well, actually, it goes back further than that. It goes back to 2017 when you all, the county council that we have right now, created the current emergency ordinance that we have. So we have a specific ordinance that allows and gives a mechanism by which we go into a state of emergency. And one of the things included in that ordinance was that it would enable the county administrator to form a task force to help at-risk populations and to coordinate directly and lend resources directly to other agencies and to nonprofits. And so, I mean, that was prescient back then. That was seeing into the future, and I didn't get it. I didn't get it at the time. It looked like boilerplate to a lawyer, you know, so I just kind of rolled with it. But then when the time came and the council really talked about, you know, what their intent was, and they made it clear, I was able to go out and take our employees, the airport, you mentioned the airport guy, Carlos Salinas, our airport director. Since the airport was basically shut down, we had him and 1.5 employees out there with nothing to do. So I put him over garnering up our volunteer base, other county employees that couldn't work because their jobs were not allowed at this time. And we repurposed them. And to get specific, and I'll leave somebody out, we had county employees delivering meals for Meals on Wheels. We had county employees cleaning the kitchen and the drop-off area for Meals on Wheels. We had county employees collecting and then taking donations to the local food bank, the Gleaning House. We had county employees assisting the United Way on logistical things and phone calls. We actually had a county employee in our EOC that was updating the United Way's phone registry. So we were calling charitable organizations around the Upstate and doing that work for the United Way. And we even at one point late in the process, the state figured out what we were doing, and we started doing porch drops and deliveries for the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs. So it was more than just charitable. We started carrying a load for some of the state folks. And I never had one complaint from a single county employee. And it was incredibly rewarding to just say, look, we're paying them. They want to work. Let's pull together because we're in the state of emergency. So it was a great procedure, great process. I think the council, when they gave us that tool in the ordinance, they really saw into the future.
Well, and Ken, thank you for that. And we'll probably want to follow up and get some more details, because I think that's a great example of a best practice. You know, there's a lot of conversations now, of course, about, you know, in hindsight, and we'll ask some of those later, what do you wish you could have done? And that's one of the things we've heard from some communities, that they started things when the COVID started, as opposed to having been proactive earlier on and making some of the needed decisions or ordinances, as you described, that would have allowed them to move into action very quickly. And I think the fact that y'all were proactive and had done that, you're reaping those rewards now. So I think that's a great example of a best practice. We're going to shift a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to Erin to ask some questions specifically around economic development, both your manufacturing and then also your small businesses and things. And Ben, I appreciate you being on from the Small Business Development Center, and Ray Farley, who's the Economic Development Director for Pickens as well, Erin. So I'll turn it over to you.
Good, Dean, thank you very much. And it's nice to see Susan Cohen on as well. And then Rick from the Department of Commerce. So it's good to see the businesses well represented, as well as Roy's comments about what happened, where the businesses are right now, and the kind of challenges that they're facing. But I want to step back just a minute and talk about before COVID-19 hit and everyone had to shut down. So what would you say, and for anyone feel free to jump in, but what would you say was the health of your businesses before COVID-19? I mean, were they robust? Were they growing, average, contracting? What would you say? Anybody?
I'll start off without a shadow of a doubt. They were very robust and growing, having staffing shortages, technical staffing issues particularly. But yeah, very, very robust.
Okay, excellent. Good. Susan?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, with all of the attention from, the obvious sports and things that were happening around Clemson, everybody was seeing an uptick. Hotels, restaurants, retail, everybody. We were kind of rolling along and came to a very screeching halt.
Okay, good. Ben, would you like to add anything, or anyone else?
Sure, I would just echo, Ray and Susan's observations. Just a tremendous climate, and absolute, the area is very attractive in particular as well. So it was really moving really, really well for the smalls.
Excellent. Cindy, I see you. Pardon me.
Cindy, do you have something there with the Easley Chamber?
No, I agree with everyone. It was, I think, putting on just my Chamber of Commerce hat, in terms of our business landscape here in Easley, in terms of our businesses, the activity that we saw, and also the involvement in our chamber in our activities and programs. The first 2 months of this year were the highest that we've seen in probably over a year. So things were, like Ray and Susan and Ben said, were very, very strong, probably the strongest it's been in a while. So it was a good time.
Okay, so
short-lived, but good.
Well, so thinking about Cindy, you talked about how participation was higher than ever in the chamber activities. So looking at organizations that provided resources and support for these businesses, we know we have the SBDC, the chambers. Were there any other organizations out there that were regularly working with the business owners to help them grow and become stronger as businesses?
I think those are the main ones. I mean, just, our local team here, our local partners pulling together and trying to, figure out the needs and the priorities. But within our chamber network, our South Carolina chamber and our U.S. chamber really stepped up. They've been providing tremendous resources that, especially small chambers like myself, we've been able just to push out and make available free of charge to our members and even non-members. I know most all of our chambers, we're a membership-based organization, and we keep that pretty close to our heart. That's very, very important to us. But during these times, we've opened up all of our programs and services free of charge to even non-members. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together. So our state chamber and our U.S. chamber have made those resources available as well to anybody that wants them free of charge. So I think that chamber network has been very beneficial for us in our industry.
Good. Thank you very much. Earlier, in thinking about how the companies, the small businesses more specifically, or the locally owned businesses, because that could be in a medium size as well, but thinking about how they were specifically impacted by the shutdown. Roy, you mentioned earlier that a lot of them now were trying to figure out how to make up their own rules, but what were some of the other specific ways that they were impacted? So maybe Ben, did
Sure.
you help folks with EIDL and PPP prep?
Sure, Erin. I can provide my observations with the folks we were working with. you know, as everybody mentioned, we were actually in the pipeline. We were tracking early in the first quarter, you know, and I've been in this for over 20 years. It was by far the best, most optimistic view of any year we've ever had. So with that, that immediate, I think the immediacy of the disruption and the depth of that. And so really what we saw immediately were folks really trying to figure out, what do I do first? So, you know, we were working closely with our friends like Cindy and Susan and Lisa at our chambers in the Upstate in particular, to have some immediate town hall conversations that really dealt with immediate response guidance. And really from there, then it was, how do I get enough cash to keep the bills paid? So, you know, we kind of pivoted with that immediately into access of emergency capital. At that point, you had the EIDL grant and loan process that our governor took, you know, a very aggressive approach to trying to get our state smalls qualified under the federal disaster. And he got that done prior to the carte blanche, all 50 states. If you guys recall this, we're walking back through the timeline. So we pushed, and the EIDL grant and loan was part of that initial SBA response for emergency capital for our smalls. So it was really that. And then the Paycheck Protection Program, of course, came along with the CARES Act. So it was really heavy, immediate, what do I do now? It's, you know, I don't really know what to do. And that was that immediate response, so recommendations, and then shifting into access to emergency capital. And then from there, if you guys recall, there was some compliance regulation that came through the Families First Coronavirus Act that would have some requirements for our smalls, less than 500 employees, but did have employees to comply with additional employee rights. So we began to see that kind of need of, okay, I hear I'm supposed to be doing something to let my employees know of special rights. What do I do? So we worked closely with Colin Trimble, who's housed on Assembly Street in South Carolina, works direct. He is an employee of the U.S. Department of Labor. So again, back with our chamber and community partners and statewide through DOC, we really worked closely with those folks. The other dimension that came into play was the unemployment issues. So we worked early with Senator Thomas Alexander, who's the chair of the Labor, Commerce, and Industry for the Senate here in South Carolina early on, to try to work with our friends at DUE to make sure the smalls knew that there was a preferred method of employer file claims on behalf of the employees to try to expedite the paychecks getting into the families who absolutely needed the money to pay their bills, and try to cut that timeline. And then through the pandemic unemployment options, for the first time, self-employed people actually had an option to file for unemployment. So these were the moving parts, kind of in order of what we observed. And again, working with most of them on this call, our community partners and statewide partners and those representing the federal entities involved. It was kind of all hands on deck type of thing, Erin. And I know that's a lot to throw at you, but that's kind of where we've been. Really in the last 2 weeks, it's been a focus with our smalls wanting by far guidance on reopening. Reopening guidance at this point, and additional access to emergency capital. And those are the things that we're seeing really trending really high on what they're needing really over the past 2 weeks. And I expect we'll probably be in that mode for quite a while.
Okay, Ben, thank you. That was very, very thorough. Susan, did you?
Yeah, kind of to just piggyback on what Ben said, I think the initial shock and panic kind of started one focus for them, and how do I keep the doors open at least a little bit? How do I keep some cash flow going? And so we worked very hard with them on how do you shift some of that business to online? How do you pre-sale things? How do you sell gift cards? How do you deliver or do curbside? So all of that was that initial rush And then the second wave of panic was, oh my gosh, like what Ben was talking about, look at all this paperwork. How do I access these programs? What do I have to comply with? As recently as a week or two ago, and Ben can elaborate on this, we had some that still had not received funds or loans that they had applied for. So they're still working on that. And then what I'm hearing now is, and part of it is just from the fact that the students aren't here and they are such an integrated part of our workforce, that in reopening and maybe having to have some additional people because of all of the restrictions and the safety and having people to sanitize, those types of things, they're very short staffed. They're all looking for staff, and a lot of concern about getting people back with the fact that you can make more money on unemployment right now than you can. And I just heard discussion this morning on the national news that might be extended all the way through the end of the year. And that's very scary to me. And then from our standpoint, selfishly as a chamber, but also that affects the community. You know, we live and breathe, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, by what happens at Clemson. And not just the students coming back, which will have a huge positive boost, but sports events, because we have that influx of people that come into town, not just sports, but any college related event, whether it's graduation, which we lost, orientation, which we lost, summer camps, which we lost, you know, it kind of snowballed. And that is just such a huge hit for this community to get over and replace. So our focus has been, how do we refocus and funnel some of our promotions and things toward extremely non-related to any kind of university activity. We still got the challenge of how do we do that until all of the concern, all of the distancing and those types of things loosen up. How do you have an event and keep those restrictions? How do you invite people back and still assure them that all of those safety issues will be adhered to? So it's going to be a challenge, plus the fact that a lot of them are funded by accommodations tax, which is going to obviously be low going into a couple of these upcoming quarters. So we see some probably even more difficult challenges for us as an organization rolling into the end of the year and the first quarter of next year than even what we saw. And to echo Cindy, we've opened it up to non-members as well. It's a community issue. It's not a member issue. So, but that takes money. And most of our programs are funded by members. So that's going to have to shift in some way. Don't know where those funds are going to come through because as organizations, 501c3s like the chambers were left out of the PPP. So,
okay, Susan, thank you.
Did that sound like doom and gloom? I didn't mean for it to.
No. That you know, it paints a good picture. Very quickly, Rick Murphy, since you represent the Department of Commerce, are you hearing anything? Oh wait, he's working on his iPad.
Okay, yeah, here I am. Yeah, this community, this county's, you know, just works in such a collaborative nature. They stepped up really, really quickly. But I do believe the state networks like the small business and Ben's group and state chamber and the governor's Accelerate SC's task force coming out with some guidelines early, I think really help people kind of understand. I know some of the things we were doing real early. I'm married to a banker, so I know a lot of the bankers stepped up early on to try to process all these demands, not only for their customers, but for others that might not have had a bank, and try to get those processed. And yeah, and I sat through a couple of Ben's presentations on helping how to do that. But yeah, I think that all worked very quickly. And I think it's just the nature of this community on how they work together.
Good. Well, thank you all. Thank you all very much. I need to move on to Michael Hildebrand now. He is talking about infrastructure and has some important questions to ask about that. So Michael, all yours.
Thanks, Erin. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody this morning. So my first question is around transportation. You know, I've heard a lot of you talk about, the lack of students and, filling jobs, and then also, the reopening issues. But so, a lot of the lower level jobs, lower paying jobs are in the service industry. And a lot of those people we know have issues with transportation. Has transportation been an issue for your community, getting these lower wage earners to jobs? I mean, I saw this morning, jobs are increasing and hiring is increasing, but I wonder, is transportation a barrier to filling those positions?
I'll weigh in on that one. I think without a shadow of a doubt, transportation is an issue. Our only public transportation provider, so to speak, is really CAT in our county. Sure. And CAT only services a portion of the county. So as you look at the labor draw area that serves our employers, the labor draw area, the bulk of the labor draw area does not include public transportation service, and it is an issue.
Thanks, Ray. Anybody else have a thought on that? If not, then my question goes to, so how are the businesses trying to address that issue? Are they coming up with any kind of innovative solutions, or do we know what they're doing?
The only item I'm aware of is they're encouraging carpooling within those groups that have transportation issues.
Okay. So sticking on the topic of going back to work, so what are some of the other challenges your community is trying to understand? I heard, and I agree, there's this, you go into a grocery store, like the chairman said, and it's just completely full, and then people are afraid to go to a business. What other kinds of challenges are you finding in the community?
So I think that one of the low-hanging fruit challenges is simply demand. Supply is there. We've had the robust economy that we've had, so therefore cash is there. What's missing is the demand. As we talk with our neighbors and friends, you all going out to eat, you're not going out to eat, you going to the bars, you're not going to the bars, going to get your hair cut, you're not going out to get your hair cut. A lot of folks are still reluctant to go out and re-engage in the community. And that creates a demand issue for restaurants and hospitality and whatnot. I'm married to an educator, so I've watched firsthand the issues of limited broadband.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. That was actually going to be my next question.
And certainly out in the community, I'm aware of broadband. And if you'll bear with me here, been working with Jim Strixinger, who you probably know Jim, on helping us to understand the mapping, really, getting away from the fallacy FAA or FCC maps that were developed that they all wanted, certain entities wanted us to all plan on. But at any rate, we've got good data now, so we know where our broadband lies and where it doesn't lie. And we know where we are strong and where we are weak in our community. And that puts us in a much better position to work with our partners, with our teammates, to perhaps pursue public funding, of which there is more and more becoming available. Pickens County is part of the Appalachian Regional Commission. Even the ARC is coming out with a little bit of money. EDA is coming out with some money. And I think that there's it sounds to me like there's going to be more money coming out nationwide. But we want to be positioned in our little community here. We want to be positioned competitively to go after that funding.
Sure. So in general, what's this group's feel about broadband? Is it a major issue, minor issue? How would you rank it for Pickens?
I would speak to that. I guess be interested in the chairman's thoughts too on that. But I would just say that one thing we learned through the COVID process and our response is in those areas that we had good solid technology, we were able to kind of seamlessly roll on. But in those areas we didn't, we struggled. And I know that had to be even more true for folks that had broadband access issues. So we can put all kinds of stuff on our website. We can make all types of county government accessible that way. But if our citizens don't have access, you know, it really, really diminishes our ability to serve them. So I was really proud of Ray kind of identifying that early on, and he's jumped to the forefront to try to figure out how we're going to be positioned to address this. I know it's something the school district's been worried about for very, very practical reasons. And so we hope we're going to be able to collaborate on that.
You know, the only thing that I would add to that is, you know, communication. The one thing that we did learn through this, other than having Brady Bunch meetings with from Zoom, is communication is so critical and so key, and access to being able to speak to each other, whether it's through education or whether it's because of emergency services. Throughout the county, there are pockets that are great. Throughout the county, there are pockets that are horrible. Ken and I can't even call each other on the phone when he drives through certain areas of the county.
At least that's what I've got the chairman believing.
Yeah, that's right. I see what you're doing. Anyway, but and I'll be honest with you, you know, what I need to understand better, what I need to be educated on, even though I work in the world of, you know, Spectrum Reach, it's on marketing advertising side, but our products and services, you know, there are agreements that are in place that the state level, it's not something that we as a county can go say, hey, we want to hire blah, blah, blah to go ahead and build the infrastructure and let's do broadband and have it across the county. I would love to be able to say that, but I don't know that we as a county council can actually do that. So, you know, but I need to understand more how that works. I know that there were at times in the city of Liberty, you know, people calling me daily, please, can you get this changed? It's horrible. You know, our kids can't get online. Our kids can't do it. I can make all the phone calls you want to the state delegation and say, can you help us with this? And they're going, no, the contracts have already been signed. So what is, Michael, you may be able to speak to this way better than I can, even though, you know, I sit in a Spectrum building, but that's really not my wheelhouse on the actual tool of broadband.
Sure. So Justine, I know that you want to kind of talk a little bit about the school and the broadband connection as well, and maybe Darian can weigh in, but Justine, do you want to kind of kick that portion off and we can keep that discussion going?
Perfect segue, Mr. Byrd, to talk about what the school districts did to address social service needs for the last couple months of school, and of course the Wi-Fi, how the kids got Wi-Fi so they could do their e-learning.
Sure. So we were fortunate that our infrastructure was in a good position that back in 2018-19 school year, you know, we were selected as one of the 5 districts in the state to start the whole e-learning pilot. And then we had the hardware out there for the students. So we were in good position in the buildings to support all those devices at once. But this whole situation has it brought to light the county-wide access issues. I know just in my own home, my wife is a teacher at Easel High School. I have a son in high school, a daughter in elementary, and then me. And there was no way for all of us to be doing all of the meetings at one time. So the district realized real quickly we had to do a better job at allowing freedom for teachers to stretch out the times. You know, the first 2 weeks, it was everybody at 10 o'clock will be on for class. And then by the end, I was able to sit in on some first grade reading lessons happening at 7 o'clock at night. You know, and so we had to learn how to adjust like that. And the Easley area that I serve, I don't think we had as many issues. I have 20 hotspots that are sitting in my office right now that we had available for families if they didn't have the Wi-Fi abilities at their houses, and they weren't requested. And I think we worked through a lot of that as we went, and we're ready to make it better in the fall if we have to continue doing this, but the issues are there. The second part of your question about social services, that was a major struggle. Because not having eyes on children was a struggle. We required across the district teachers to report to principals weekly the check-ins and how many students they were able to get their eyes on, and then counselors and administration, we would follow up with those students that we weren't able to find. And we got that down to a very minimal number. And but I tell you, just for Forest Acres, where I'm principal, very few. We've made very few calls to social services, and I know that if we were face to face, there would have been more. So I fear what we've missed, because I know there were needs that we just didn't know about.
How about food service? I know some of the districts did, when they sent out the Wi-Fi buses, they did food pickup or community food deliveries, anything like that?
Yes, I was fortunate to, one of the reasons I'm on here today is I'm doing a superintendent internship with Dr. Merck. And one of the tasks that I was able to take on was organizing the food service process for the county. And so we had 12 sites working to prepare breakfast and lunches. And we sent out a fleet of buses 3 times a week to cover the entire week's meals. And I know at the end of we did it for 10 weeks, and it just actually ended on Tuesday. At the end of that, we served somewhere between 550,000 to 600, somewhere in that range. So lots of meals were provided, and that was a great service and another way for us to get eyes on the students and you know, provide a little sense of normalcy whenever they saw that yellow bus come around the corner.
Right, that's a good point, that you have a chance to have eyes on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a plan to continue that throughout the summer?
So we just switched to the summer feeding program that started Wednesday. And so that's, there are 4 sites, and I had that pulled up, so I know that each site, the Liberty and Easley and the central area and Pickens area, there's schools set up to provide meals daily. You just have to go to the sites for that. So that will continue all summer.
That's great. Thank you so much. And in talking about social services, anyone have any input about how seniors were assisted over the last couple months with services, food, medical assistance? I'm looking around for our United Way people. Or, barring that, any other areas of the community, people that you think might have fallen through the cracks? We talked a little about college students and not being able to go home, get back, go to a different country where they live, even going to their state across the country where they might want to get home.
Justine, we have Scott Drury from Southern Wesleyan on, and Scott might be able to talk a little bit about what they've done. Scott?
Sure, Dean. We did have a group of international students that were, for lack of a better way to describe it, stranded and continue to live in the residence halls. We still have at least one that I'm aware of, international student that's not permitted to travel back home at this time, and is continuing to live actually in the community. We had a university affiliated family that took her in essentially. But she probably will move back to campus and make a full summer plan to just stay here on our campus. I would say for the most part, I don't know if you would call this falling through the cracks. As many people know, the Department of Education was deeply involved in the distribution of the CARES Act funding for higher education, and in their guidance indicated that international students would not qualify for the extra assistance that came through. So our students were affected like everybody else, in the sense that those students did not receive any additional assistance, even though many of them were required to stay here in the U.S. because they weren't able to travel back. At this point, as it relates to Southern Wesleyan and our students, all of our international students that can and wanted to travel home to their home countries have done so. We do have a few that have remained in the United States, but had relatives or other close family or friends that they went to stay with, except for this one African student who her country is still closed to outside travelers. So hopefully that's helpful. Obviously, our main concern as a university is we have a lot of students who rely on summer work to afford their tuition and fees in the fall. And that's obviously, the current economic circumstances and the types of jobs that our students typically fill are probably some of the most affected by the economic fallout from COVID-19. And so we're cautiously monitoring those situations. We're working as a university to mobilize additional support from our alumni and friends in our donor network, as well as in our church support network that comes alongside being a faith-based institution. So we're trying to prepare as much as possible for that, but just recognize that the economic hardships are impacting our students. We don't necessarily have a lot of direct information in terms of how they're doing at this moment now that they're off campus, but to the extent that we can, we've been reaching out and communicating with them, and our financial aid office and other offices on our campus that interact with students have been reaching out to try to intervene in circumstances that as we sort of become aware of them. So
great, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. It must be frustrating and a little scary to be stuck somewhere where you can't get home. We're thinking that Mr. Abbott, you might want to talk briefly about what the Salvation Army has been doing.
Yeah, we've had preparing for funding to assist with utilities and rent and maintaining households through this process. Working very, very closely with the United Way, which has been a fantastic platform because they've put together meetings where all the social services are coordinating together, because you need it all, from childcare to health to all of it. And United Way's done well in having us all collaborate and share information there, and at the same time helping with fundraising for various needs, both locally and applying for other avenues of finance support for the entire county. So that part has gone well. The transportation, just to revisit that, it is a large problem. Most of who we serve are at entry-level type jobs, and lack of transportation limits the available places they can get to. So just to put that there, and that leaves them dependent on assistance more. We still, honestly, we haven't seen the push for assistance as far as contacting us that we have expected yet. It's staying, trickling is what I would describe it. And we expect at some point that will become more of a wave, but that hasn't occurred yet on our end. We're coordinating all our efforts with the other agencies and communicating so that if we can't do something, we know someone who can. We're referring. Again, that's where transportation comes up again. And to revisit the food insecurity issues that are there, the school system and what they've done is just fantastic. The 5 Point Church and United Christian Ministries and what they're doing there is been good as well. And then the Gleaning House. So there is some access to, but again, transportation comes with all of that. And we had the added struggle in the midst of all this of the tornadoes. So that's been going on down in Seneca and then here in Pickens County at the Laurel and Hardy Fish Camp area and the families that are affected there. But, and again, I've got to give United Way an appreciation there. They immediately set up some account, opportunities to donate to that. And we've been able to get into those communities and trying to help. So everything that I see, I think the response, the communication is key, knowing what's there and how to access it. And I do want to go back to the internet. A lot of what the service providers did in trying to protect their own staff is move to a platform of a web-based application process. And again, that's a great thing if you have access to the internet, if you can get on the internet. So looking to the future, I think transportation and internet for education, for social services, for health, for all of these contributing factors are key elements for our county. Because I'm not sure this new way is going to go anywhere anytime soon. So, but anyway, that's kind of a feel for how we do not have the walk-in traffic. We just don't have the regular traffic that we've seen. I don't know if that's got to do with, the unemployment money that might be out there is keeping people taken care of as much, but we haven't had the wall of requests for help that we thought we might at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. That is wonderful, being the organization that's bringing people together and facilitating communication. We're almost at our time, so we'll let Sharon Purvis wrap us up. She has some follow-up questions.
Sorry. I did want to ask about things that were going on prior to COVID-19 that have maybe been put on the back burner. In particular, Roy, if you could talk about Pickens United, if that's still what you're doing with that right now, and if the pandemic has had any impact on that, or you're doing any work related to that, that'd be great.
Sure. So Pickens United was created so that because that was the big problem I think that we were facing in Pickens County about 4 years ago, that we didn't communicate, that we didn't have an opportunity to get together to talk, not just as this would be from county council to state delegation to the municipalities to the different organizations that are throughout the county. We did have to cancel because we couldn't get everybody in the same place at the same time. However, that hasn't stopped our communication. For example, last night we had a town hall that was with Senator Rice, Davey Hyatt, Vice Chairman Chris Bowers, and myself, to be able to do that where people could come in social distance, but still live stream that. We also, in one of the things that we created last year that kind of was a spinoff of Pickens United was a county coalition meeting between Greenville County Council, Anderson County Council, Oconee County Council, and Pickens County Council, and that we get together quarterly to share ideas, to find out what are best practices, to kind of learn from each other, and has been very successful over the past couple of years, and that got put on hold. So Butch Kervin and I are working on, I guess the next one will probably be a Zoom meeting like this, and then hopefully get back to the business at hand. I mean, it is, just because all this happened doesn't mean that we stopped communicating. Matter of fact, I think we communicate more than we ever have. You know, my biggest challenge is that we're not meeting just for the sake of meeting, but that we're actually accomplishing something, that we're putting together tasks. And that's what I love about 10 at the Top, is that we get together, share ideas, and then we come up with the specific action plans on things that we can do to continue to you know, rebound out of this crisis, but to also, you know, plan for the future, not just a year from now, but 20 years from now.
Okay, that's great, Roy. Thank you so much. It's great to hear that you're expanding that communication effort outside of Pickens County. I think we're going to end there because it is after 11 o'clock. As Dean said, we're going to be putting together your responses with the other counties' responses. We'll have a video of this meeting on our website so that you can, you know, if people who weren't able to be here want to see what happened, and then there will be a recap. And then in the coming weeks, week and a half, 2 weeks, hopefully not too many weeks, we'll kind of synthesize the information and get that out and figure out what to do with the information. So we really appreciate your time today and all of your comments, and really, you know, very appreciative of everything you had to say today. So enjoy your weekend, and thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.